All right, it is that time of year. We get to talk about all of our favorite books, reflect on the ones that made us cry, made us laugh, and overall just made the reading year so good. So, I want to share with you all of the books that I ranked as my top 10 favorite books. And I will share my honorable mentions as well as ultimately what my favorite book of the year was. So, without further ado, let's jump into the honorable mentions first. The first book I want to mention is From the Desk of Zoe Washington by Janae Marks. So, in this story, we follow Zoe, and she is a 12-year-old girl who is an aspiring baker. But the main thing that we focus on in the story is her dealing with her relationship with her father. Her father has been in prison for pretty much her entire life, and it's her navigating that relationship that she really never had and figuring out whether or not he truly is innocent as he claims. I really love this story so much. I felt like this was such a delight to read. It was fairly short. I want to say around like 300 pages or so. And I appreciated the purity that Janae Marks took with Zoe's character. She was just approaching these issues in life as any young child would. Like, why would a person be imprisoned or convicted of a crime if he never did it? That doesn't make any sense. What I appreciated the most about this book is that Zoe was not aged up at all. She was dealing with these problems and these issues within her family and the different secrets that were kept from her. But at the same time, she also is dealing with typical like middle school type stuff. Like she has a friend, Trevor, who she is really close to during the summer, but then during the school year, they're not as close. I appreciated them working through that and them figuring out a way to resolve it. I don't really have the words, but I really enjoyed the story. I definitely want to read the next book in the sequel, and I really recommend this to anyone who is just looking for a well written middle grade novel and a well written novel in general. I feel like anyone at any age could appreciate this. Next is Black Cake by, I was about to say Isabel Wilkerson. No. Next up, we have Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. This is a historical fiction novel that follows a family as they work through the loss of their mother. So Eleanor is a woman who has recently passed away, and instead of the typical, reading of the will, she's actually left behind a recording of her telling her full story. There are plenty of secrets, and it is set on the backdrop of Jamaica, or they call it the island in the book, but we know it's Jamaica. Jamaica, in England, as well as in, I believe, Los Angeles. Let me be honest with you. When I first read this story back in January of this year, I finished in January. It actually took me a month and a half to finish reading this story. And I don't know what was going on. I think it was just I was personally very busy and I didn't give enough time to this book. But I really did enjoy it and I really kicked myself because I knew that if I would just read it straight, that I would have really given it a 5 star right away. And so it really took me some time to give this book a 5 star. I first gave it like a 4.5, and then it wasn't until later on this year when I got to watch the adaptation of this book that everything just came back to me and it reminded me of why I enjoyed this book so much in the first place. I really did love the story and I highly recommend it. The only reason why it wasn't in my top 10 was because of the fact that it had to grow on me, essentially. It took time for me to really appreciate this book for what it was, but I still recommend it. Okay, and with that, let's jump into my top 10. So this list is really not in any particular order. I'll be talking about the various books, but it doesn't necessarily mean that one is ranked higher than the other. Everyone is pretty much in the same boat as being a favorite, except for one. One has taken the cake. So number 10 is going to be Sister Mother Warrior by Vanessa Riley. This is a historical fiction novel that follows Gruntoya and Marie Claire, and they're both women who played pivotal roles in the Haitian Revolution. And I really enjoyed the story so much. This book really just shows me that historical fiction is my favorite genre. It is so well researched. Really love this book so much. I enjoyed getting to know these two women and their strength and being able to see the roles that they played in the Haitian Revolution. Highly recommend this book if you really love well written historical fiction novels. This I just can't stop recommending. Please check this out. Next is Leaving Atlanta by Tayari Jones. And this is a book that is a novel, but it follows the events that took place during the Atlanta child murders in the late, or was it the early? I think it was the early 1980s. Please, I'll be corrected on some screen if I'm wrong. But yes, this story, it was so well written. I know I'm saying this all the time. I really appreciate that we got multiple POVs in this book. I believe there's 3 different POVs. I personally enjoyed how we were able to hear it from the children's point of view. Every single point of view is from a child during this time period. Tiare Jones actually is a character in this book, not as like a main person, but she placed herself within the story because during this time period she was a young child while the Atlanta child murders were happening. And so I think this is her first novel as well, and I feel like it was probably a way for her to kind of tell the story from her perspective, or how the kids in her class were working through that. So I really enjoyed, I always enjoyed her stories, but I really enjoyed this one because I knew it was her first novel and because of how personal this book was for her. What I really appreciated was the fact that she talked about not just what was going on with the incidents that were going on throughout the city, but also she was able to have each character share what they were going through in their personal lives, and how what was going on with the child murders was kind of on the periphery. It affected some things, but then at the same breath, like, these kids still were wondering about whether they're going to be invited to a sleepover, and like all those types of little things. Tiare she keeps just blowing my mind when it comes to her story. So if you haven't read any of her work, I recommend any of them, but definitely this one. Hi. So when I was editing this video, I realized that I was missing 2 books. 2 of the books that I wanted to talk about with you are not here physically. I don't own them yet. I'm going to eventually, but alas, right now I don't have them to hold up. So let's talk about those 2 books. The first one is Do Angels by Melanie Schwab. It is a young adult novel that is focused and set in a fictional town called Redding in Jamaica. So in this story, you follow Nola Chambers. She is a young girl who was born darker skinned, and because of that, her family as well as her community kind of ostracized her. Unfortunately, she grows up in a community that celebrates those that are of lighter complexion and those that can even pass for white versus those that are of darker complexion. But eventually in the story, we do find that Nola is able to develop friendships and relationships outside of her family and community that are life-giving and help to build up her confidence in who she is. And I absolutely just adored this story so much. I'll be honest, when I first was starting to read this story, it was a little bit slow, and I had to take my time to really absorb all of the background. And it really aided me when I was reading the middle to the end of the book. By the end of it, I was just cheering Nola on. I was really impressed by her character development, the friendships and relationships that she was able to develop. Overall, I think this book was just so well paced, except for the beginning. And overall, I really did just fall in love with it. And it really is one of those books that I feel like really needs to be hyped a lot more. Next is So Many Beginnings by Bethany C. Morrow, and this is a retelling of Little Women. This was a part of the Classics Remix project that had multiple authors of color writing retellings of beloved classics. I'm a huge fan of Little Women, and so I was looking forward to reading a retelling, especially by a Black author. And I was pleasantly surprised and even exceeded my expectations the way that Morrow was able to take the characteristics and the personalities of the characters in the original and keep them intact, but also bring a lot more depth and complexity to them. If you're not familiar with Little Women, it follows 4 young girls, Meg, Jo, Amy, and Beth, as they are dealing with the effects of the war. Their father is gone, he is fighting in the war, and it's just them and their mother kind of managing the house. This story takes a similar path, but it adds the complexity and the girth that I was talking about, with these characters being Black young women who were recently freed, and they were able to build their lives in the time of Reconstruction. The historical relevance in this book was just so well executed, and I could go on and on about just all of those different aspects of it. So I'll say that if you're a fan of Little Women or other classics, Or if you are just looking for more books that are centering Black voices during different historical periods of time, then I will highly recommend this book. It was very well written and it was just a joy overall to read. Okay, let's jump back into the top 10. Next up is All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir. I've talked about this book all the time, everywhere that you can find me talking about books. I'm bringing this book up. This is a story that follows Salahuddin and Noor, and they are both close friends, high school seniors that are getting ready to graduate and figuring out what they're going to do with the rest of their lives. Both of them go through so much in their senior year of high school, but and also in their lives in general. They're both Pakistani immigrants, and Saul wants to become a writer. He's an aspiring writer, and then Noor wants to become a doctor. But there are certain circumstances in their life that are hindering them to progress and to kind of have those future aspirations. And so we learn all about that in this book. What I love most about this book was the character development. These young people are going through a lot. They just seem so real. I was so stressed out reading this book because I really wanted them to be okay. And things kept going worse and worse and worse in their lives. And I have said this before and I'll say it again. I read this book and it broke me. I literally could not read anything for at least a week and a half. I couldn't write a review for a good month. But yeah, I highly recommend this book. Definitely read trigger warnings because, like I said, they go through a lot, but it is so well written. And literally, when I was like 20%, I think, into this book, I looked up Sabaa Tahir's next book because I really wanted to read something else by her because she blew me away. She definitely blew me away with this one. And with that, let's continue on with the Sabaa Tahir praise team. And let's talk about An Ember in the Ashes by said author. So in this book, we follow Laya and Elias. Laya is the servant to a very prominent leader in a martial empire that is occupying her homeland. And Elias is a student soldier within that martial empire. And so this book is really all about resistance. It's about struggle. It's about finding love and joy in the midst of hardship, all of those things. And it's set in this very like politically intriguing and complex world. So I think this is a young adult fantasy. I think it is young adult, but I mean it's really new adult because these people, these again, Sabaa Tahir and these characters, they just go through a lot, but you want to root for them. You want the best for them. But yeah, I appreciated the dual POV. I liked learning about Laya and Elias. I think the other books in the series are going to be 3 parts or 3 different points of view. But yes, but yeah, this was such a fun time. Well, fun time. It was a fun time because I enjoyed myself. The things that they were going through were not fun. I literally read this book and I was itching to read the next one. So I did go ahead and buy, like I said, all 4. I'm looking forward to rereading this one this year and then continuing on with the rest of the series. Next up is Love Radio by Ebony Liddell. This is a young adult romance, and we're following Danielle and Prince. Danielle is an aspiring writer who is just not a lovey-dovey kind of person. She's not a romantic or anything like that. And Prince is literally DJ Love Jones. He runs a radio show where he gives out love advice and he plays love songs in the background. And so he's all about romance and all the things. And he has a huge crush on Danielle. And he wants to convince her that he could get her to fall in love with him over 3 dates. This book, guys, it was so cute. That's the one word that I always think of when I look at this cover and I think about my time with it. Like, I think of the blurb from Jasmine Guillory says, it's pure joy. It is pure joy. This book was so cute. This book also had like a little bit of a heavier topic in like the midst of it. So I suggest, looking up trigger warnings. But I think overall, this book was very cute. Like, we see how Prince is just wanting to, you know, woo Danielle and she's just not having it. But at the same time, she's falling for him. And it's so cute. It's just so cute. I read this in February. Actually, I read this, I think, over the course of 2 days. I think it was the day before Valentine's Day into Valentine's Day. Perfect time to read. Just if you're in a lovey-dovey mood and you like cuteness and you want all the feels, read this book. There's a scene where he's actually taking down her braids. Oh my gosh, so cute. Yes, get this book and read it. Next up is Finding Me by Viola Davis. And this is a memoir by the amazing Viola Davis. I love listening to Viola tell her story. I highly recommend, if you're doing this memoir, please get the audiobook. It's at the library, at least someone's library. I got it from the library when I listened to it. It was so good. It was so cool to kind of hear her do her mom's accents, because her mom and dad grew up in North Carolina or South Carolina. I think it was North Carolina. Viola Davis is just, she overcame a lot, and she approaches it in such a mature way. That's the only way I can describe it. Is she reflects, she sees where she made a mistake, where she went wrong, she acknowledges it. But there's also times where she is able to tell, these amazing stories of the way that, people showed up for her. Even she mentions like the way that, God shows up for her in certain aspects. And so I highly, highly recommend, if you have not, the hype is real, I know, on this book, but it's worth it. The hype is, they're not lying to you. They're not lying to you about this one. Next up is a book that I don't hear talked about enough, personally. I don't hear it talked about enough, and that is Independence by Citra Banerjee Divarkaruni. This is a historical fiction. Any surprise? No. So in this story, we follow three sisters as they are working through their lives as India is finding and gaining their independence. I really enjoyed the story so much. Citra did such a great job of talking about, again, how the independence of India, the separations between, people that were, following Islam and people that were Hindu, and the huge, huge conflict that was going on between these two religious people from these religious groups. It was very gripping. Again, another book where I was stressed. I wanted to make sure that everyone was going to be okay. I was at the edge of my seat, wanting to know what's going on, and it was an anticipated release for me. And so I picked it up from Book of the Month, and I was so happy that I did, because I never read anything from Citra Banerjee Divarkaruni before, but I definitely want to read more of her works now, because it was so well written. The characters were very well developed. The plot was there. Yeah, if you're looking for a book about that time period at all, or just wanting to learn more about, India and how India gained its independence, and, the religious and political things that were going on at the time, definitely recommend picking this book up. And the last book that I have, I'm so excited to talk about. I love this book so much. It's, oh, sorry for the glare, but it's The Davenports by Crystal Marquise. This book right here, guys. So I had a list of 5-star predictions for 2023, and this one is the only book that met and exceeded my expectation. I really expected that this book was gonna be a 5-star, and it did it. It was amazing. I often think that this is the book that, middle school, high school Gabby would have loved and enjoyed, and I'm so happy that grown Gabby can enjoy this book as well. Yeah, I just coined that, grown Gabby. Sure. This story is a historical fiction novel, historical romance, historical YA, whatever you want to call it. So we're following 4 young women in 1910s in Chicago in the 1910s. They are 3 out of the 4 are women of means. So with Olivia, who is the main woman we see here, her and her sister Helen are of the Davenport family, and their father is the owner of a very prosperous horseless carriage company. Or is it horseless carriage or a carriage company? I think it's just a regular carriage company. And they are doing very well for themselves. And because of that, they are able to, go to fancy balls and have nice clothes and live in a beautiful home. The reason why I really did love this story so much was because we had that element of that. And if you watch The Gilded Age, it's kind of similar to that, where we see Peggy, and she is, her dad does really well for himself. And because of that, she didn't have to experience as much as what he did, back when he was a slave. And we have a similar dynamic of that, which is that I believe his name is William Davenport in the story, and he actually was a slave. He was able to gain freedom and was able to make a lot of fairly good investments and business decisions. And because of that, create a great livelihood for his family. You get to see his relationship with his children and how they are essentially making their own way into their futures, not just being Davenports, but what do they want out of their lives? Do they want to, join the family business? Do they want to pursue a different career? And each of these 4 young women are navigating finding love. I am really excited for the sequel to come out. I'm gonna pre-order it like as soon as I possibly can. It's coming out, I believe, in May. And I'm so excited for it. I know it's going to be great because I love this book so much. I literally took a month to read this book. Not because it was slow, but because I knew I just wanted to savor it. I wanted to savor it. This was everything that I wanted to be and more. And I just wanted to stay with these characters as long as I possibly could. So yeah, if you are a fan of The Gilded Age, if you're a fan of Downton Abbey or any shows like that, then I highly recommend reading this book. So those are all my favorite books. I want to know what your favorite book of the year was, if you have one, or just what a few favorites that you might have. So let me know in the comments below what those are. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys.